This was an odd little discovery as I was playing through the Japanese 1990 titles, especially considering the PC Engine CD version never came to the US. You see, it had already been here for 5 years and was probably one of the more popular edutainment series from self-published studio Broderbund. Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego premiered on American computers in 1985 and came bundled with the World Almanac Book of Facts as a pack-in. The goal was to track down notorious criminal Carmen Sandiego and her band of like-minded thieves as they stole notable historical items from across the globe. The only way to properly track down and identify criminals was by flaunting your knowledge of various countries around the world, or just proving your browsing skills of the included almanac were up to snuff. Nowadays with Google, the almanac is no longer needed, although the concept of what you have to do still remains unchanged some 30 plus years later. The concept is relatively simple. You question people in popular cities about the criminal, where you'll learn facts about who they are or where they were going. If you learn about who they are, you can enter that information in the profiling computer and hope to narrow the search down to a single suspect and get a warrant. If you learn about where they were going, it's usually some mildly cryptic clue that has one major factoid that stands out and identifies the city. As you continue your path, you will jump from city to city, hoping to narrow down the true suspect and, of course, their home base. Since there aren't many suspects and you have to solve around 80 cases to complete the game and catch Carmen Sandiego for good, you can expect for some suspects and cities to come up quite often. There's enough variance in the game that it's not all that noticeable and doesn't seem to affect your enjoyment along the way. Granted, 80 cases is a lot, especially when you consider you'll spend up to half an hour on any single case, so it's mostly a game of attrition beyond anything else. You don't have to solve all these cases in one sitting, which would honestly be impossible, because the game had a save feature on every platform. The PC Engine CD version is a bit unique in that it doesn't come with the almanac, and instead it seems to have it built into the game thanks to the CD-ROM format. I was never able to get it to work though, so I relied on the trusty internet for my information, always having to remember that cities and even the names of countries were different back in 1985. The game is also available completely in Japanese or English, so I had no problem enjoying this title as if it had come to the US on the TurboGrafx CD. This is the first game I encountered with this option, although I'm fairly certain this is also the first game that originally premiered in English. Beyond that, the game looks pretty much as I remember the classic computer versions did. Graphically, it has received a bit of a boost, and the soundtrack is much smoother than my old Commodore 64, but at best it's matching quality with the Amiga. While it looks good for a Carmen Sandiego port, this is a rather lackluster example of a PC Engine CD title in my opinion. I have to admit that I still had a lot of fun playing it and reliving my childhood, so if you do have interest in experiencing this game, it may be one of the easier versions to find and play these days. Oh, and before I go, just one more thing. Do it, Rockapella! Sorry, I couldn't help myself. Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego may have been a popular computer game, but in America, it was an even more popular kids' game show. Appearing on PBS from 1991 to 1995, this hybrid game show, musical showcase, and sketch comedy program had wide appeal during its 5 seasons and nearly 300 episodes. Contestants would play as gumshoes and spend 3 rounds trying to capture the elusive Carmen Sandiego by first grabbing her henchman, then tracking her down, and finally revealing what city he or she thought Carmen Sandiego was hiding in. What most childhood watchers like myself probably remember more than the show's finer points were the a cappella music group known as Rockapella and the Chief. Rockapella performed various songs, including the infamous theme song written by Sean Altman and David Yazbek. Where in the world is Carmen Sandiego? The Chief was the host of the show and played by the charismatic Lynn Thigpen, who nailed the role of the Acme Detective Agency's leader. Regretfully, a brain hemorrhage took her life in 2003 at the age of 54, but Thigpen's role as the Chief is immortalized for the American children that watched her in the early to mid-90s. It's perhaps this television show that grows a much larger American appeal for the franchise and perhaps is the biggest reason why you may still be tempted to track down a copy.